The ship had been quiet for hours. Just the steady hum of power coils and the soft breath of recycled air. Most of the crew was asleep. Only a few guards were posted at the main doors. That's when she entered, small, delicate, and carrying a folded cloth in her tiny green hands. She was called Eula. She was only 90 centimeters tall. Her large golden eyes scanned the empty hallway carefully. She was one of the cleaning staff, a servant from a low-rank alien race. Most humans aboard barely noticed her. She didn't speak much, just nodded, bowed, and cleaned. Tonight, she was assigned to clean the guest wing. That was where the human ambassador stayed. He had come for peace talks. People said he was tall, quiet, and dangerous. But Eula had never seen him. She entered the room, holding her tools. Everything looked still. The lights were dimmed. There was a wide bed in the center, covered in a thick brown blanket. A small desk, a few empty glasses, a datapad. Eula floated up carefully, her tiny feet never making a sound on the floor. She began dusting the corners. She moved silently across the carpet, checking under the desk, straightening the chair. Her large ears twitched at every creak. As she stepped closer to the bed, she noticed something odd. One corner of the blanket had moved, just slightly. She froze. Her hand stopped wiping. She stared. The blanket moved again, very slowly, like something underneath had just breathed. Eula's heart raced. She wasn't trained for this. She was just a maid, not a guard. Maybe he was asleep. Maybe he rolled over. But she had been told the ambassador left the room 3 hours ago. She hovered near the bed, biting her lip. Her hand reached for the edge of the blanket. She needed to check. That was her job. But her fingers were shaking. She touched the fabric gently. It was warm. Slowly, she began to lift it. A hand shot out, not a human hand. It was black, thin, and clawed. Eula screamed. The scream echoed through the hallway. Guards rushed in, weapons drawn. The lights turned bright. The ambassador, tall and calm, ran behind them, confused. What happened? He asked. Eula was on the floor, curled up, covering her face. Her cleaning tools scattered around her. The blanket was half off the bed. A strange creature was lying under it. It looked like a mutated insect. Long body, spiny arms, thin mandibles. Its black eyes reflected the light. It hissed when the guards stepped closer. Where did that come from? One soldier asked. No record of it entered, said another. The ambassador moved forward and stared at the thing. It didn't move. It seemed weak, hungry. Eula sat up, still shaking. Her voice was soft. It was sleeping under the blanket. I saw it breathe. I didn't know. The ambassador knelt beside her. You did good, he said. You found something we didn't know was here. Eula blinked. No one had ever said good to her before. Not like that. She lowered her eyes, unsure what to say. The guards dragged the creature away. Medics scanned the bed. The ambassador stayed behind and looked around. Check all rooms, he ordered. I want to know how that thing got in. As the team moved out, Eula sat quietly on the floor, still holding her cloth. The ambassador turned back to her. What's your name? Eula, she whispered. I'm Commander Hart. She nodded. Stay close to me tonight, he said. Until we know it's safe. Eula looked up at him, confused. She had never been asked to stay near a commander before, but she stood and followed. That night, the entire ship was searched. 3 more hidden creatures were found. All of them weak, hiding in strange places, vents, storerooms, inside luggage. No one knew how they had entered. Eula stayed beside Commander Hart the whole time. Wherever he went, she followed. She didn't speak unless asked, but her ears twitched, her eyes watched. She noticed things others missed. A moving panel. A faint scratch on the floor. A warm breath where none should be. The commander noticed. You have sharp senses, he said once. Eula didn't reply. But her cheeks turned light blue dot by morning. The ship was locked down. The hidden creatures were captured. Hart stood in the main hall, watching the screens. Eula stood near him, holding a cup of warm water he had not asked for, but accepted. Everyone thought the danger was over, but far below, in the cargo bay, something else had started moving. And this time it wasn't weak. The cargo bay lights were dim and cold. Machines sat in silence, some half open, others sealed. Boxes were stacked tall, some marked for medical, others for food or tech supplies. But one container near the back slowly shifted, just enough for a faint metallic click to echo through the bay. No one heard it. Not yet. Up above, Commander Hart stood in the briefing room with his senior officers. His face was calm, but his voice was sharp. 4 hidden creatures. No logs, no alarms. This was a targeted breach. "They're not strong," said one of the security heads. "Small, weak bodies. Small doesn't mean harmless," Hart said. "One made it into my bed." Everyone looked toward the back of the room where Eula sat silently, her large, golden eyes watching. She had been allowed in the meeting. Not because of rank, but because she had seen what no one else did. Hart looked at her. "Eula, when you entered my room, did anything feel strange? Different from the others?" She paused, then slowly nodded. "It was too quiet. Air smelled bitter, wrong. You can smell that?" Her ears twitched. "Sometimes," Hart leaned back. "Then I want you to come with us. We're going to check the rest of the ship. One level at a time." The others looked surprised. No one ever brought a servant into search ops, but Hart didn't care. He had learned one thing fast. Eula noticed more than most trained soldiers. They moved through the levels slowly. Eula walked close to Hart, her small steps soft, her nose twitching. She would stop sometimes, sniff the air, or point to something strange, dust patterns that didn't match. A boot print too fresh, a power panel that was half unscrewed. Each time they found signs. "Whoever sent those things," Hart said. "They planned this. They hid them carefully, watching, waiting." Then the alert came, a scream through the comms. "Cargo bay movement." Something just broke a lock. Hart turned at once. "We're heading there now." Eula followed without question. When they reached the cargo bay, the door was already cracked open. 2 guards lay inside, not dead but unconscious, with long cuts on their arms. One was groaning, blood dripping from his mouth. Hart stepped in with his weapon drawn. "Stay close," he told Eula. She nodded once. Inside the shadows, something moved again, not like before. This one was bigger. Hart stepped forward slowly. Eula stayed just behind his legs. Then the thing leaped. It wasn't like the smaller ones. This one had armor, dark bone plates covering its chest and arms. Its legs were long, twisted like a spider's, and its teeth were sharper. It didn't hiss, it roared. Hart fired first. The shot hit, but the thing kept moving. It smashed into a crate, bounced off, and lunged again. Eula screamed as Hart rolled to the side and fired again. The creature missed him by inches. Then it turned toward her. It saw her. The smallest thing in the room. It rushed. Hart shouted, "Eula, down!" But before it reached her, Eula moved fast. She jumped to the side, grabbed a metal rod from the floor, and stabbed it upward. The rod pierced the creature's jaw. It screamed, pulling back, blood leaking from its mouth. Hart shot again. This time, it fell. The cargo bay fell silent. Eula stood frozen, the rod still shaking in her hands. Hart knelt beside her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. Her hands were trembling, but she didn't let go of the rod. "You stabbed it," Hart said, almost surprised. She blinked. "I didn't want it to touch me." He smiled. "Good instinct." Medics came in minutes later. They carried the guards away and took the body of the larger creature. Later, in the medical wing, Hart sat beside Eula as a nurse scanned her for injuries. "You were brave," he said. Eula looked down. I'm not brave. I'm just small. They didn't see me as danger. That's why you're dangerous, he said. They don't expect it. That night, Hart made an order no one expected. Eula was no longer just a cleaner. She was assigned to stay beside him for safety, yes, but also for her senses. The crew didn't understand it. Why would a human commander keep a tiny alien maid at his side? But Hart knew better. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't just hiding. They were testing Dot, and something told him this wasn't over. The next morning, the crew was tense. Everyone moved quickly, checking systems, watching the halls. The bodies of the creatures had been taken to the lab. The scientists said they had never seen anything like them, not registered, not from known planets, not in any database. Hart stood outside the lab window, arms crossed. Eula stood beside him, holding a small cup of bitterroot tea. She didn't speak, but she watched the bodies with quiet eyes. One of the scientists pointed at the creatures. Chest, it's not natural armor, it's grown like bone, but fused with metal, hybrid. Another added, its nervous system is fast. It reacted quicker than most trained soldiers. Hart asked, is it alive? No, but it was recently fed. There's fresh organic matter in its stomach. Hart's jaw tightened. It ate something, or someone. He left the lab and walked down the hall. Eula followed behind, silent as always. 3 more missing crew members, one guard said through comms. All last seen in cargo maintenance. Eula looked up at Hart. They're not hiding anymore, she said. They're hunting. Hart nodded. And testing how far they can go before we react. They turned into the security room. Maps of the ship blinked on every screen. Movement sensors, life signs, pressure scans. Hart leaned forward. Show me all low-activity zones for the last 12 hours, he said. A technician filtered the map. 2 areas lit up engineering waste. Chute and secondary water tanks. Send patrols to both, Hart ordered. No one goes alone. Eula pointed at one of the corners on the map. That wall wasn't there 2 days ago. Hart narrowed his eyes. You're sure? She nodded. When I cleaned, there was a pipe there. Now it's gone. Hart called the engineer on duty. What's in Section 4B lower tank area? The engineer replied, nothing major. Just sealed crates and unused storage. Who sealed it? A pause. No record of that. Hart's voice sharpened. Send backup now. He and Eula rushed through the corridor. 2 guards joined them with rifles ready. As they neared Section 4B, the lights flickered. Hart's sleeve. Smell it? Hart sniffed. Oil and rot. The door to the tank room was locked. Hart entered the override code. The door opened slowly. Inside was darkness. And a thick, strange smell. Eula's ears flattened. They're nesting. Hart stepped in, flashlight raised. The room had been changed. Walls had sticky resin covering them. Metal crates were torn open. Some were covered in web-like strands. Bones, small, sharp, were scattered across the floor. One crate moved. Hart motioned for silence. He crept forward, weapon aimed. Then something fell from above. It hit one of the guards, knocking him flat. The others fired. A loud screech echoed in the space. More movement. From every direction, shapes crawled out from the walls, smaller than the armored one from before, but faster. Their limbs clicked against the floor. Dozens. Hart fired shot after shot, yelling for retreat. Eula didn't run. She pulled the fallen guard by his arm, dragging him back toward the door. Hart turned and covered her. Move. Eula didn't stop until they reached the hall. Hart slammed the door shut, locking it from the outside. The creatures inside clawed and slammed against the walls, but couldn't break through. The hallway was quiet again. The guard she dragged was breathing, though weak. Hart looked at Eula. Her arms were shaking. She was covered in sweat. But she didn't cry. You pulled him out. Hart said. She only nodded. He's your soldier. He's alive because of you. That night, all hands were called. Hart stood in the center of the command deck. They're breeding in our ship. He said, we thought we stopped them, but we were wrong. He looked at the crew. From now on, no one walks alone, no one sleeps alone. This isn't a visit anymore. This is survival. And through it all, the tiny maid stood beside him, no longer just a cleaner. The crew watched her differently now. She had faced death 3 times, and still hadn't stepped back. But far in the shadows of the sealed room, one larger shape stirred. Its eyes opened, and it smiled. The crew worked in silence now. Fear moved through every hallway like smoke. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow felt deeper. Commander Hart hadn't slept in 2 days. He stood over a table full of open files, logs, and scans. He was trying to find the point of entry. How the creatures got in, how many there were, and why they were here. Eula sat nearby, sorting through empty food packets. Her job wasn't to study maps, but she was still helping. She looked at the empty wrappers with narrowed eyes. These aren't ours, she said quietly. Hart turned. What do you mean? She lifted a long silver wrapper. We use red seals. These have blue. Hart picked it up. These are from another ship. Eula pointed at a strange mark burned into the corner. This isn't a shipping code, it's something else. Hart stared at it. That's a brand mark. Some black market ships use it to tag stolen cargo. He stood quickly. They didn't just sneak in. Someone brought them in on purpose. Moments later, Hart called the security team. Check every crate we brought in from outer border sectors last month. Focus on untagged shipments. A report came back fast. There was one unmarked supply pod. It came from a derelict freighter. No logs, no heat signatures. We assumed it was abandoned and took what was left. Eula's ears twitched. The eggs could have been inside. Hart's voice was low. Someone wanted them on our ship. He looked at the scanner data. Motion still showed in the sealed tank room. But now something else was showing too. Power drain. The creatures weren't just hiding. They were feeding on the ship's systems. That night, lights in 2 lower decks went dark. Teams rushed to check. One was found empty, but the other 3 soldiers never returned. The search team that followed found only blood, a broken helmet, and deep claw marks on the wall. Eula sat by the window that evening, watching space. Hart joined her. He looked tired, his face pale under the lights. I've seen wars, he said, but this is different. Eula didn't speak. He looked at her. Why do you stay so calm? She folded her hands. I was born during a ship raid. My home was destroyed when I was 2. I've always lived with fear. I just don't show it anymore. Hart was quiet. Then she added, but you're different. You don't fear death. You fear losing people. He looked away. She was my sister, he said. The one who told me to join the fleet. She died in a sneak attack like this one. I couldn't save her. Eula looked at him with soft eyes. You saved me. Hart didn't reply. The next day, alarms went off again, this time in the medical bay. By the time they arrived, the room was full of smoke. One of the creatures had broken out of a sealed container. 2 nurses were hurt. But that wasn't the worst part. The body of the armored creature, the one Eula helped kill, was gone. Hart stared at the empty table. It wasn't dead. A medic pointed at the security feed. The footage showed it twitching, slowly standing, then stabbing itself with a sharp rod from a shelf. Why would it injure itself? Hart asked. Eula stepped closer. Maybe it needed pain to trigger something. Just then, a tech ran in. We picked up a signal. It's coming from inside the ship. Hart narrowed his eyes. What kind of signal? Short bursts, deep language pattern, binary and clicks. Hart stared at the screen. They're calling for more, Eula whispered. Then we don't have much time. That evening, Hart gathered his officers. This ship won't survive another wave. We either cut the infection now, or it spreads. He looked at Eula. You saw things none of us did. If there's another nest, where would it be? She closed her eyes and whispered, heat, quiet, hidden. Maybe. The old garden bay. No one goes there anymore. Hart's eyes widened. That bay was sealed for months. Eula looked up. Then that's where they are. They formed a strike team. Hart, Eula, and 6 soldiers moved toward the old garden sector. As they neared it, a chill ran down everyone's spine. The lights flickered again, and from behind them, something let out a deep, slow growl. The growl echoed down the hallway like a storm rolling in from the dark. Everyone stopped. Hart raised his hand slowly, signaling silence. Eula froze behind him, her ears twitching hard, her breath locked in her chest. One of the guards turned. Back with a scanner. Something's behind us, he whispered. Big, moving fast, Hart spoke calmly. Keep going, no loud sounds. No flashing lights. If we run, it chases. Eula gripped Hart's jacket gently. It's already chasing. The floor vibrated slightly, then again. The sound of something heavy scraping the wall followed. A large shadow moved between the blinking hallway lights, limbs crawling upside down across the ceiling like a massive insect. They moved quicker now. Hart opened the hatch to the sealed garden bay. The door groaned, rusted from time. It hadn't opened in months. Inside, it was thick with warm air and fog. The garden systems were still half active. Old plant life had overgrown the machines. But that wasn't the only thing here. Eggs. Dozens of them, clustered near heat vents. Sticky walls lined with hard resin. Some of them were already cracked. Eula's eyes went wide. It's a hive. Hart looked around, shocked. This is how they grow. One of the guards stepped forward and raised his gun. We burned them. Now. But the moment he stepped close, the ground broke under him. A massive clawed hand burst from beneath and dragged him down. The team opened fire. Screeches filled the room. From every side, more creatures appeared, smaller, faster teeth, shining with wet hunger. The air turned red with muzzle flashes and smoke. Fall back. Hart shouted, but one of the soldiers didn't make it. Pulled into the egg pit, gone in seconds. Eula grabbed a fallen stun rod from the ground and charged with Hart toward the center. They had one chance to destroy the queen. If there was a queen, then they saw a dot at the back wall. High above the others sat a large creature twice the size of the rest. Its chest glowed with faint green light. Tubes ran from its back into the wall. Its head turned slowly toward Hart and smiled. Not with teeth, with understanding. Hart fired a full burst. The bullets bounced off its bone-plated arms. The queen screamed, and the entire hive echoed with its cry. Every creature went wild. Eula leapt up onto the side machinery, climbed quickly, then jumped onto a pipe. She pulled out a flare grenade from Hart's belt. He shouted, "No, Eula!" She didn't stop. She ran along the pipe, jumped above the queen, and dropped the grenade into the fluid sack near the wall. The explosion lit the entire room in fire and smoke. Screams shook the walls. The egg pit cracked, and flames spread fast. Hart ran forward, grabbed Eula mid-fall, and dove behind a broken platform. The rest of the team ran as the entire garden bay started collapsing. The fire ate through the resin. Explosions ripped the vents. The creatures screamed, but they were dying. Hart held Eula close, shielding her from falling debris. When the smoke settled, most of the nest was ash. A few of the creatures crawled, burned and broken, trying to escape. Hart picked up a rifle from the floor and ended them one by one. Later, in the med bay, the survivors were treated. Eula sat on a chair, her arms bandaged, her eyes staring at the floor. Hart sat beside her. "You could have died," he said. She didn't. "Look at him," But I didn't. He leaned closer. Why did you do it? She raised her head slowly. Because no one else could. I'm small. They don't see me. He smiled slightly. They see you now. For the first time, Eula smiled too. Hart stood and looked out the window. The ship was damaged, yes, but it had survived. Thanks to a maid who was never trained for war, but far beyond the stars, on a dark hidden world, another hive waited, and a message had already been sent. Asterisk 3 days had passed since the hive in the Garden Bay was burned. The crew moved like ghosts tired. Quiet, but alive. Parts of the ship were still sealed, being cleaned and checked for any last signs of the creatures. Eula walked beside Commander Hart through the upper deck. She wore a small badge now, not for rank, but for duty. She wasn't a maid anymore. Not to them. The hallway they passed was quiet. Eula's ears twitched. No more movement, she said softly. Hart nodded. Scanners are clear, but I still don't trust it. They reached the command center. Screens glowed with star maps, system scans, and crew logs. A new signal had been received, one they didn't understand. Hart looked at the officer. Play it again, the message repeated. A long series of low sounds, crackling pulses, and broken tones. It wasn't a voice. But it was alive. Something intelligent. It's from deep space, the officer said. Beyond known territory. Eula listened carefully. Her eyes narrowed. That sound, she whispered. It's the same pattern the hive made. Before the queen screamed. Hart looked at her. Then they're not gone, not yet. He paced slowly. Someone sent those things. Not just to kill, but to test us. To see how we'd fight. How we'd survive. A silent moment passed. Then Hart said, set course for the signal source. I want to know what's out there. The officer hesitated. Sir, the crew. I'll speak to them. Later that day, Hart stood in the center hall. The full crew gathered, tired, wounded, but standing strong. Hart's voice was calm and clear. You all survived something no other ship has faced. We were attacked from inside, and we didn't break. He pointed toward the stars. But this was only the beginning. The signal came from deeper space. Whoever sent those creatures, they're watching, waiting, planning more. He looked toward Eula, who stood small beside the wall. This crew survived because one of us, someone smaller than all of us, saw what we couldn't, fought when she wasn't trained, risked her life for others. The crew looked at her. Some clapped softly, others nodded. Hart smiled. This ship doesn't run on weapons or ranks. It runs on people who refuse to give up. He raised his voice. We're not running. We're going to find the source. And we're going to stop them before they send more. The crew raised their fists. A cheer broke out, not loud, but steady. Full of strength. The next morning, the ship turned toward the dark edge of the star map. Engines warmed. Lights blinked across the hull. In the commander's room, Eula sat on the floor, polishing tools again, not as a maid, but out of habit. Hart watched her from his desk. You can take a break now, he said. She looked up, smiling slightly. I don't like sitting too long. He raised an eyebrow. You sure you're not secretly a soldier? She blinked, then looked away. No, but I think I was born for this. Hart stood and walked toward the window. Stars moved slowly now as the ship picked up speed. What do you think we'll find out there? He asked. Eula joined him. Standing silently beside him, she whispered, I don't know. But whatever it is, it won't see us coming. Together, they looked into the stars. A human commander and a tiny alien girl, side by side, ready for whatever came next, because the galaxy had tested them, and they had survived.